In the digital age, as the boundary between the real and the virtual becomes increasingly blurred, high-tech criminals have discovered sophisticated loopholes to target the most vulnerable group in society, the elderly. Recent investigative reports and information from Vietnamese police regarding a large-scale scam network led by Tran Quang Dao have revealed a dark picture of a smoothly operating fraud machine disguised as a legitimate business, where the trust and fears of the elderly are ruthlessly exploited for profit. Without flashy seminars or extravagant shows at event centers, this criminal group worked in the shadows, hiding behind phone lines and attacking victims right in their own homes, a place they believed to be the safest. The case has shocked the public not only because the financial loss reached hundreds of billions of dong, but also because of the psychological cruelty involved, leaving deep emotional scars on thousands of families across the country. The story begins in air-conditioned office rooms equipped with hundreds of computers and phones, where countless young employees made those fateful calls day and night. The mastermind behind the entire system, Tran Quang Dao, knowledgeable in both technology and crowd psychology, built a fraud empire under the guise of 4 reputable functional food companies. In reality, these companies were criminal hubs where scam scripts were crafted down to the smallest detail. Unlike traditional crude scams, Dao's group did not approach victims randomly. They collected personal data from thousands of elderly individuals, including names, addresses, health conditions, and even daily habits. With this list in hand, they launched their phishing net campaign through highly convincing impersonation calls. Dao's employees were trained to introduce themselves as doctors, pharmacists, or officials from nutrition hospitals or community healthcare centers, names that sounded credible and compassionate, easily lowering the defenses of elderly people who constantly worry about their health. The scam scripts were built upon a deep understanding of elderly psychology, loneliness, the desire for attention, and the fondness for receiving promotional gifts. The first call was never meant to sell anything right away. It was to deliver good news. On the other end of the line, a gentle, caring voice of a grandchild or a doctor informed the victim that they were the lucky winner of a special appreciation program organized by the hospital. The rewards described were extremely appealing: expensive health-boosting products such as turmeric milk, bird's nest, Nok Lin ginseng, or smart household appliances. The key hook of the trap lay in the phrase, completely free. For elderly individuals living on modest pensions, receiving a valuable gift at no cost was a great joy, helping them overlook any initial doubt. Once the victim took the bait and agreed to receive the gift, the real extortion began. When trust had been established and the victim awaited their gift, the follow-up calls came in rapid succession with seemingly reasonable explanations for various fees. It started with just a few $100,000 dong for shipping fees or processing fees, small enough for the victim to pay without hesitation. However, once the victim made this first payment, the scammers knew they had fallen into the sunk cost trap, feeling reluctant to lose the money already spent. At this point, the criminals escalated the scam. They called to say the gift was too valuable and required additional payments for VAT, customs duties, or insurance fees to ensure it wouldn't be lost in transit. These fees gradually increased from a few million dong to tens of millions of dong. To intensify the pressure, the scammers constantly switched roles, sometimes a pushy delivery staff member, sometimes a reassuring director, promising that all fees would be refunded along with the gifts after procedures were completed. The cruelty of Dao's group lay in their complete lack of restraint. Even when a victim was financially exhausted, they continued fabricating new rewards to squeeze out every last dong. Some elderly victims withdrew all their life savings, borrowed from their children, and even sold their property to chase these illusions. The scammers exploited the elderly's lack of technological literacy and understanding of administrative processes to manipulate them. When victims began doubting or could no longer pay, the tone on the phone immediately shifted from sweet persuasion to threats, telling them that failure to continue paying would result in losing all previously paid fees or even reporting them to the authorities for refusing delivery. Terrified and confused, many elderly victims continued borrowing money to send more payments, sinking deeper into debt, without realizing that no gift existed and that those doctors were nothing more than professional scammers reading from a script behind a computer screen. The scale of the operation was staggering when investigators stepped in. Initial findings showed that within a short period, Dow's group had successfully scammed over 7,000 people, stealing tens of billions of dong. However, the real number of victims could reach into the hundreds of thousands, given the enormous amount of data found in their computer systems. Their network extended across numerous provinces, functioning like a multinational corporation with strict hierarchical management. Below Dow were numerous team leaders and sub-leaders responsible for monitoring the quotas of telesales employees. Each worker faced strict sales targets, making hundreds of calls per day, using any tactic necessary to coax victims into transferring money. To avoid detection, they frequently changed IP addresses, used disposable SIM cards, and relied on unregistered bank accounts purchased on the black market. Whenever they sensed risk, Dow ordered the destruction of hard drives, deletion of data, and the dismissal of staff, leaving investigators with empty offices and major obstacles. The Ministry of Public Security and local police successfully dismantled the operation, arresting Dow and key accomplices, a major achievement, but also a heartbreaking revelation. The recent prosecution and detention of 23 additional suspects demonstrates authorities' determination to eradicate the network at its roots. Most of these suspects, many of them very young, confessed clearly to their crimes. They admitted being trained professionally in communication techniques, handling objections, and exploiting the psychological weaknesses of the elderly. Audio recordings and thick scam scripts seized at the scene are damning evidence of their wrongdoing. More disturbingly, they viewed fraud as just another office job, arriving at work daily, putting on their headsets, and starting the hunt without the slightest guilt about stealing from people old enough to be their grandparents. Some even admitted that when victims cried and pleaded because they had no more money, they still coldly followed the script, pressuring them to borrow more. The consequences of this case extend far beyond financial losses. For the elderly, the shock inflicted greater damage to their health and mental well-being than any illness. Many victims fell into depression, emotional collapse, or even suffered strokes from the distress and shame. They blamed themselves, too embarrassed to tell their families for fear of scolding or disappointment. Family relations also. Thank you for watching this story. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video. And now it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for staying with Societal Stories.